Welcome to another episode of the UFO Book Library. On this edition, we're looking at wartime UFOs. First published in 2012, UFOs in Wartime, What They Didn't Want You to Know explores one of the most intriguing patterns in UFO history, the repeated appearance of unexplained aerial objects during times of military conflict. War has always accelerated technology, secrecy, and intelligence gathering. Those same conditions also create one of the most intense observational environments imaginable. During wartime, thousands of trained observers are scanning the skies. Pilots, radar operators, gunners, and intelligence officers, often under life or death conditions. That makes military conflict one of the most fertile environments for unidentified aerial encounters. In this book, aviation writer Mack Maloney steps directly into that intersection. Rather than treating UFO sightings as isolated mysteries, he examines them as recurring events, observed during humanity's most intense periods of conflict. Maloney surveys encounters reported across multiple wars and theatres of operation, suggesting that unidentified aerial phenomenon may have shown a consistent interest in human military activity. That idea has become increasingly central to modern UFO research. Mack is best known as an aviation writer with strong interest in military history and aerospace technology. Over the years, he's written extensively about military aircraft, speculative aerospace concepts, and defence-related mysteries. That aviation background is important. Writers who understand aviation culture tend to approach UFO reports differently from purely paranormal authors. They're familiar with aircraft capabilities, with the language pilots use when describing aerial objects, and with the operational environments in which military aviators operate. Maloney has also hosted long-running radio and podcast discussions covering UFO sightings, aviation anomalies, and unexplained defence-related incidents. Through that work, he has spoken with pilots, researchers, and investigators who spent years studying aerial phenomenon. Because of this background, UFOs in Wartime approaches the UFO mystery through the lens of aviation and military observation. The witnesses in many of the cases he examines are trained observers, pilots, radar operators, and military personnel, people accustomed to identifying aircraft and recognizing when something in the sky does not behave as expected. That perspective gives the book a grounded tone even when the events being described are extraordinary. One of the central ideas explored in this book is that UFO sightings appear repeatedly during wartime conditions. During conflicts, skies are filled with aircraft and radar systems are operating constantly. Military personnel are trained to identify unknown threats quickly and accurately. In other words, wartime environments produce large numbers of highly trained observers. It is therefore striking that so many unusual aerial encounters have been reported during major conflicts. Maloney traces reports going back to the early days of military aviation during the First World War, when pilots occasionally described strange lights and unexplained aerial objects appearing near the aircraft. But the most famous wartime sightings occurred during the Second World War. Allied and Axis pilots alike reported mysterious glowing spheres that followed their aircraft during combat missions. These objects became known as Foo Fighters, and they were seen by bomber crews across Europe and the Pacific. Pilots described luminous objects capable of pacing aircraft at high speed, maneuvering effortlessly around bombers and fighters before disappearing. Despite wartime intelligence investigations, no definitive explanation was ever discovered. Because these sightings came from experienced military aviators operating in combat conditions, the Foo Fighter phenomenon remains one of the most intriguing historical chapters in UFO history. So what is this book about? Rather than focusing on a single famous case, Maloney surveys UFO encounters across multiple wars and historical periods. He explores reports from the First World War before moving into the better documented sightings of the Second World War and the mysterious Foo Fighter encounters. From there, the book moves into the Cold War era, when jet aircraft, advanced radar systems and nuclear weapons dramatically increased the strategic importance of airspace. Maloney also examines Vietnam-era reports and later modern military encounters, building a narrative that stretches from early aviation through to the modern age of advanced aerospace technology. Running through all of these reports is a proactive pattern. Unidentified aerial phenomena appear again and again in the vicinity of military activity. Readers will encounter a wide range of wartime UFO reports drawn from military aviation history. Maloney reconstructs encounters involving pilots who described objects behaving in ways no known aircraft could replicate. By explaining the operational context surrounding each sighting, the mission being flown, the aircraft involved and the technology available at the time, he helps readers understand what pilots would normally expect to see in the sky. That context makes the anomalies stand out far more clearly. The sections covering the Second World War Foo Fighters are among the most compelling. Pilots repeatedly described glowing spheres that followed aircraft but showed no hostile intent. These objects could not be intercepted and seemed able to maneuver in ways far beyond the capabilities of wartime aircraft. Maloney discusses how military secrecy and classification can influence how unusual sightings are recorded. During wartime, strange aerial encounters may be filtered through intelligence channels rather than being publicly reported. That adds another layer of mystery to the historical record. This book matters for several reasons. First, it highlights a persistent pattern. UFO sightings often occur in environments where military technology and trained observers are concentrated. Second, it introduces aviation expertise into the discussion of UFO encounters. Many of the witnesses described in this book are pilots and military personnel whose observations carry considerable technical credibility. And third, it connects historical wartime sightings to the modern conversation surrounding unidentified aerial phenomenon that is now taking place within defence institutions and government investigations. The continuity between past and present encounters is one of the most fascinating aspects of the UFO mystery. Many UFO books concentrate on civilian sightings, abduction narratives, or conspiracy theories. UFOs in Wartime approaches that subject from a different direction. Here, the focus is on military observational environments, places where aircraft, radar, and trained personnel are consistently monitoring the sky. That setting often produces more disciplined observations and more technically detailed reports. It is a perspective that adds an important dimension to the broader UFO literature. If unidentified aerial phenomena repeatedly appear near military operations across different wars, nations, and technological eras, it raises an intriguing possibility. The phenomenon may not be hostile. Instead, it may simply be observing. Rather than intervening in human conflicts, these objects may be monitoring them. If that idea is correct, it reframes the UFO mystery from one of invasion to one of surveillance, and that possibility carries profound implications. So, the UFO Book Library score for this comes out at 8.9 out of 10. It earns that strong score because of its aviation expertise, its historical breadth, and the credibility of the military reporting it explores. The only small deduction comes from the unavoidable limitations of wartime documentation. Many reports remain anecdotal, and physical evidence is rarely preserved during conflict. Even so, this is a highly worthwhile addition to any serious UFO library. If the idea of pilot encounters interests you, there is an entire branch of UFO literature devoted to reports from military aviators who've encountered unexplained objects while flying operational missions. The Foo Fighters sightings of the Second World War remain one of the richest areas of research, while Cold War radar encounters provide another layer of technical detail. Modern Pentagon discussions about unidentified aerial phenomenon have brought many of these themes back into the spotlight, making historical studies like this more relevant every year. That's it for this episode of the UFO Book Library. If you've read this book, let me know your thoughts in the comments or suggest another title you'd like us to explore next. And if you're an author with a UFO-related book that you can submit to the channel, details are in the description below. If you enjoyed this episode on military UFO encounters, we recommend this video. Or for a deeper dive, why not check out more books in our military UFO playlist. Please support the channel by simply subscribing, sharing and liking our videos to help us so we can bring you more.